Have you ever wondered what it's really like to be a woman motorcyclist? Maybe you're a woman who's interested in riding and you've been a little afraid to take the leap. Or perhaps you're already riding and you're wondering if your perspectives are realistic, or maybe if you are suffering from some imposter syndrome. Whatever the case might be, I'm here today to share my experience as a female rider who started as an adult, did not grow up in this community, has experienced this community across the United States and experienced the cultural differences that exist even right here within the same country. This video is mostly for the ladies, but men, if you're looking to help women grow in this sport and become more active in the sport, then perhaps this is also going to be useful for you. Have you ever wondered what it's really like for women in the motorcycling community? Maybe you're a woman who's interested in motorcycles, or you're interested in riding, but you feel like there's some barriers in the way, or perhaps you're already a rider and struggling a little bit in the cultural differences and understanding where you fit in the community. I wanted today to go over some of my experiences here in the United States in several different regions of the country, and what I've personally experienced as a rider, as a track day enthusiast, as a racer, and as a coach. So let's get started. There are some things that I think are pretty universal regardless of the area or type of bike or type of riding that you choose to do. Some of those are just stereotypes and doubts that the greater riding community has. Let's be honest, this is a male-dominated sport. Historically, it's been very male-dominated. My personal life hero, the late Mary McGee, who I've had the privilege of meeting a couple times, was a groundbreaker in this community. A woman who has very recently, just passed away, was the first woman to do a lot of things in the riding community. Women have not been openly accepted in the community. Even now, there's still a lot of stereotypes. It's not uncommon as a new rider, or even an experienced rider, to have guys ask you, they may see your bike in the garage and be like, oh, does your boyfriend ride? Or your husband ride? Number one, I'm single. Number two, no, those are my bikes. Thank you very much. But they assume it's not you to begin with. So right off the bat, there's this underlying assumption that this isn't a woman or her bikes. Then there will be comments about women shouldn't be on bikes that big, or that's an awfully big bike for a small lady, or the list goes on. Guys, if you're watching this, women encounter this all the time. Even after years of riding, proving their skills, we still get these comments all the time. In addition to these blatant stereotypes that tend to be pretty universal, at least here in the United States, then we have other things that women run into right off the bat before they've even hardly started riding. The vast majority of motorcycle gear is designed around men. Was built with men in mind, and then it's adapted for women instead of the other way around. So women are going to struggle with gear fit. A lot of gear is not very adaptable to the varying shapes of women's bodies. Our bodies are very, very different from one woman to the next. So finding gear that can fit women is very difficult. And some companies have taken up the mantle of trying to be sure that their gear can fit women and a wider variety of women, but it's still a challenge. It's a challenge for the companies to invest in that, and then it's a challenge for the women who are wanting to ride. Sometimes this can be a barrier for women, especially if their body doesn't fit in a certain mold. It can really be difficult to find even gear to get them on a motorcycle to begin with. And then there's just basic confidence and suffering from imposter syndrome. Even when I was on the West Coast, where there were a lot more women riders, we were still a minority. You show up to a riding spot, you stop at a local hangout, and you are the exception to the general rule. It's a little bit more of a struggle to relate to everyone around you. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. It's just the reality of the situation. I think it's good for people to be exposed to a more diverse crowd and more ways of approaching the same sport. But for the woman, you are going to be not only fighting these stereotypes right off the bat, you're also going to be the minority. Not necessarily a bad thing, just something you need to be prepared to deal with as a female rider. That said, there is a ton of support out there if you're willing to look for it. I do notice that different regions of the country have different levels of subtle support. The West Coast, there was a lot more open support for women riders. There was a lot more just a vibe of encouraging women to be there and wanting our presence in the paddock, on the street, at the events. Not everybody, obviously, and there's still very misogynistic people everywhere, but for the most part, I found it a much more welcoming environment, a much more encouraging environment. When I moved to the East Coast, Southeast specifically, the vibe here is very different. And what I've found is even a lot of the men in particular who want to support women in the sport, there's still this underlying misogynistic attitude. The mansplaining is next level. And I see women dismissed a lot more in the same conversations. So for example, you have a group of riders discussing a topic. The female in the group is her skills, her knowledge, her experience is just as good at, if not superior to, the majority of the men in the group. But her comments will get downplayed or flat out ignored compared to anything any of the men say. I didn't experience that as much on the West Coast. So there's clearly a cultural difference. I also see a lot more new riders or newer riders who want to grow in the sport. They want to become more skilled, but because of these attitudes, these underlying, very subtle attitudes, they get discouraged from it. So ladies, we need to band together. So on the topic of women and banding together, if you're a newer rider, if you're interested in riding, if you want to talk to women who ride, if you want to advance in the sport, if you want to try out a different area of the sport, say maybe you're started out on more cruiser street style riding and you want to move into adventure riding or track days or racing even, grab the women around you. It's going to be hard, but being shy is definitely something that can hold us back as female riders. Whether it's asking the men, asking the ladies, just keep speaking up. You also need to get a little bit out of your own comfort zone. That said, find support that you're comfortable with as well. There's online communities, and online is great for a sounding board, perhaps getting some different perspectives, just knowing that you're not alone. I honestly don't think there's much that can replace that in-person support. There are women's riding groups all over the country. Out west, I was a part of a group called Curve Unit, super supportive women's riding group. They were the ones who got me into track days, which led me to racing. And it was a fantastic experience. Those women will be lifelong friends, even if we don't see or talk to each other very often anymore. I miss their faces dearly. But here on the Southeast, I've struggled to find a group to connect with that were women-centric or very supportive of women. I found some who accept women, but there's a difference between acceptance and support. So it's been a struggle, but some ladies in the area have started another group that I think is fantastic. I'm actually wearing the sweatshirt today. Feral Mottos. Shout out to the girls. And once you have that community, it will help you build up your own self-confidence, your own ability to go do the things that you want to do that make your heart beat, that are your passion. And just having that support there to begin with is so huge. I've admitted this to a couple people. If I hadn't had the support I did out on the West Coast when I was getting into track days, thinking about racing, if the men there hadn't been as supportive, I don't know that I would have pursued that and realized how passionate I was about it. It is going to be more challenging for the ladies. How we approach riding is very different. The mental aspect for women is generally going to be a little different. We're not as by nature, we're not as aggressive as our male counterparts. And because of that, training techniques and attitudes, there's a little shift. There's a subtle little shift that can make that environment so much more welcoming for women. Also need to support other riders. So if you're already a female rider, if you've been riding, if you're established, you have your passion, if you see those newer, younger sisters out there, go out to them, reach out to them. I'm not great at this myself. I tend to be very introverted, and I can kind of suck at helping bring these women along and being supportive of their desire to be in the sport. So that's an area for me to work on as well as a female rider. If I want to see this change, then, we need to be our own change as well. So a little self-reflection there. Lastly, we ride motorcycles because we have a passion and a love for the sport. We want to experience the world in that way. And if you ride, you know that it's a unique experience to experience the world on two wheels. Regardless of outside support, that inner passion needs to be there. If you honestly hate riding or you don't find the risk worth the reward, all respect to you. This sport is definitely not for everybody. It requires a level of physical, mental, and frankly, risk-taking that not everyone is open to, which is perfectly fine. But if you do love this sport, if you do want to participate in this sport as a female rider, come into an understanding there may be various challenges that you are going to have to face and overcome. It's so worth it. Even if you end up riding mostly on your own, it is so amazing to experience the world through this lens and from behind that helmet, even those embarrassing moments. So another thing that we struggle with as ladies sometimes is just strength. Bikes are heavy. We're not super strong, especially in our upper bodies. Women tend to be a little weaker than men. And I just had an experience recently. I've been riding for quite a while by this point. I think we're coming up on 20 years. And I came to a overlook stop, stopped, parked my bike, and I've dropped bikes many times over the years, usually because you forget to do something, you do something wrong. Well, this time it turns out that the angle of my kickstand and the slope of the ground was just wrong. And as I got over the bike, it literally rotated over the kickstand. Like it was just, the ground dropped right where I put my kickstand down, just enough where physics took over. And my bike ended up dropping rather gently on its side, but it dropped. And of course, I'm not alone at the stop out. So here I am, the girl who just dropped her bike. And guys rush over. They're very nice. They help me pick up the bike. I wanted to die. Ladies, we're going to have this happen. It's going to happen. We are going to do things like that. We're going to have things happen. I was perfectly capable of picking up my bike. I've done it more than once. But being the girl, it's embarrassing to drop your bike for anybody, I'm sure. When you're like the only girl there, and that's embarrassing. I'll admit, in this area, for the most part, I've preferred to go ride solo. I haven't found a riding community out here. The type of riding I enjoy, the pace I enjoy, is not popular in this area. And so it's been a struggle. It wasn't real popular out west either, but I found riders in various areas who did enjoy that kind of pace and that kind of ride. And I always had a small circle of people around me. Plus I had the curve unit, and I'm looking forward to the rides with the Feral Moto group this year. And overall, I just want to encourage women riders to understand that as a female motorcyclist, you are going to experience some unique challenges, from gear and fitment to finding a bike that fits you, to primarily, honestly, it's the cultural differences, at least here in the United States. I cannot speak to what it's like in European countries. I do know how demographics look on the world stage, but as far as like local, smaller communities in other countries, I know riding in general is more accepted in Europe and Asia, for example, than it is here in the United States. So I'm going to guess that there's differences. I have not personally had the opportunity yet to go out and experience it for myself. I hope to eventually here. But at least here in the US, women, there's going to be some challenges. You're going to be facing misogyny, maybe on a level you're not even traditionally used to. So my point in all of this is just that, ladies, you are going to face some unique challenges, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're kind of breaking ground in this sport still, but just be aware you're going to face all the challenges that any new rider faces, along with some additional challenges, whether it's finding a bike that is the right size for you, that you're comfortable on and confident on, to finding gear that fits or a company that makes gear custom with women in mind. These are all challenges you may encounter. Despite that, there is actually a lot of support to be found. It's just not real obvious necessarily. So, for example, Bison is where I have my race suit from, and they have their custom gear. Everything's custom made, but they also keep women deeply in mind in their suits and in what they're doing and how they fit things, their patterns, that sort of thing. So I think it's really important to find companies that support not just the sport, but women in the sport. Another example is Dunlop motorcycle tires. They've been a sponsor of mine in the track and racing community for a number of years now, and I'm not the fastest person out there. I'm not the one winning all the races and, going on to the professional level at this point, but they still support the sport. They see that it's important to support riders who are passionate about this sport, who are willing to overcome the challenges, and I'm a huge proponent of companies who want to see the sport grow from all angles. I've also had a number of people in my corner over the years who have supported me even when it didn't make a lot of logical sense, and some of those individuals have probably been a major reason why I continue to do this sport, why I've kept at it despite some pretty significant challenges at times. So find your circles, find the support groups, find the ladies riding groups, find the companies that really promote women, women's gear, women's participation in these sports. So it's a great community. There's so much to be gained by being a rider, from your self-confidence to just exploring the world in a unique way that you can't experience any other way. So I'd love to see you join the sport. If there are specific topics that you feel would be helpful, some things you want to learn, or maybe some tips or tricks or riding techniques that you would prefer to hear from a woman's perspective than maybe what you've found, leave a comment, let me know. I plan on doing some videos that are more specific to, specific riding skills, specific gear choices, that sort of thing. So if you have some suggestions, some things that you're just not finding that information, let me know in the comments. I will add it to my list of videos that I'm looking to do. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoy your riding if you already are. If you're thinking about it, if you want to get into the sport, again, let me know in the comments. Let's start building a community of women riders, not just in person, but also online. And I want to see this sport grow, and I want to see women grow within the sport. Come join us, come be a part of everything that we're doing here.